Hi there, my name is Jon Hutman. I design sets for movies. You might know some of my work from the films that I've done with director Nancy Meyers. I'm going to talk about how I go about achieving a cozy home, whether it's for a set or for your own house. For me, the kinds of spaces that I think about: the cottage from The Holiday, Meg Ryan's apartment in You've Got Mail, and even like the home that everybody loves from the Gilmore Girls. Warm, intimate space, color, and texture defined by natural materials, furnishings which are historic and eclectic, layered elements of art, books, fabrics, wallpapers, colors. If you want to create a cozy space, it's important that you create a sense of containment. Start with a space that has some sense of enclosure. Then I ask myself, how am I going to separate that space from the rest of the room? How am I going to inhabit that space? The window treatments that you put on those windows, if you put more curtains, or I happen to love matchstick blinds that will filter the light, all of those things will help physically contain the space and control the light that filters into the space, and that will help the space feel cozy. Another way to create or enhance this sense of containment, let's say I'm in a room and I've got a blue door on one side, or I paint a wall blue. If I have a blue wall on this side and I do a blue cabinet on the opposite side, naturally those two colors are going to come together and make me feel contained or enclosed. And in this particular interior, they have enhanced the sense of coziness in a couple of ways. There are complementary pieces of furniture on all three walls. There's a day bed with a wood frame and complementary upholstery textures on the cushion and the pillows. There's a desk at the far end. There's a writing table opposite. So the space closes in around me. They've also got bookshelves above the day bed, and those bookshelves, if you'll notice, wrap around over the window. And what that does visually is it brings the ceiling down. Anything which makes me feel like the walls are closing in around me is going to feel cozy. I was going to say until the point where it starts to feel claustrophobic, but there's two ways to contain space. One is to bring the walls in, and one is to bring the ceiling down. So if I want to bring the walls in, I can add furniture like tall, blocky furniture, whether it's an armoire or a bookshelf, something that reduces the amount of space around me. But the other thing that's very effective is if I can bring the ceiling down. So I can do that using a broad chandelier. I can do that by lining the wall with bookshelves. One thing that's very effective, and you see it in dining rooms a lot, when you've got a high wainscot that stops maybe 2 feet short of the ceiling, and then there's often a wallpaper mural that wraps around there, it lifts the ceiling and it brings the wall down. If you want to do the kinds of tricks that we see in this sun porch, adding bookshelves either on the floor against the wall, but if I put them high, I'm going to have this feeling that makes me contained and safe, like I have in my living room. And by the way, this is not my living room. Sneak in the disclosure. Even though I designed the room that I'm in, which actually belongs to my ex-wife Sam, this is not where I live. I live in a cabin. It is made of redwood, so it is warm, it is dark, and 2 of the walls are entirely lined with bookshelves. And they're books that I've personally collected over the course of my career, and that's my library. And it creates this texture which is meaningful to me. It becomes decorative, but it's also personal and it's functional. And there is something about being surrounded by your stuff, not my stuff, not magazine stuff, your stuff, which starts to feel personal and cozy. Now, this first space is a hallway. It's a space that you pass through rather than a space that you settle into. But the fact that it has a low ceiling, an arched opening painted blue, the walls are covered with an eclectic mix of art, mainly framed prints, and you've got a little slice of bookcase on the side, you've got a nice warm textured carpet that grounds the room, and you've got that little glass cabinet, which complicates the space so that it feels just a little bit, not quite crowded, but I'm sharing the space with my things, which means when I enter the space, it's already kind of full. And when I leave the space, it will not feel empty. The next most important quality to bring into a cozy space is texture. There are several ways to create texture. One is wallpaper and fabrics. If I have a plain wall and I put a pattern on it, I've instantly got depth and texture. The next way is going to be fabric, whether it's curtains or a tapestry or something like that. And then I've got art and books. Any of those things are going to take a solid hard surface and break it up. I'm going to show you this beautiful floral tapestry on the wall. The scale is big, but it's kind of got this aged sepia tone behind it, which ties into the natural warmth of the floor. The red of these giant flowers is picked up in the flowers on the table, on the tablecloth, and in the faded worn rug underneath that table. So it is cohesive in terms of color, pattern, texture. What I love about this image is I've got a tapestry on the wall with gigantic flowers, and I have a much smaller scale version of that pattern on the tablecloth. That creates a successful dialogue between two separate elements. And notice how the left edge of that painted tapestry has this faded blue, and that blue is mirrored in the paneled door on the right side of the room. Very subtle, very elegant, but the color brings those two walls together. It makes me feel enclosed. And the combination of texture and color allow me to do that. Here's what's subtle and interesting. You could say, well, why can't I go to IKEA and get a bed and a dresser and a nightstand that are all from the same set? Won't those be unified? They will not be, because they become generic and plain and cold. When pattern becomes texture, it's warmer, it's softer, and it's more inviting. I have this image, a gallery wall that is mainly pen and ink drawings, all framed in like gold, silver, natural wood. This is a cozy moment, essentially without color. This is all about texture. And what's instructive about this art is that rather than looking at that's a drawing of a seascape with a bush, what I'm seeing is an overall mix of these soft textured drawings in soft complementary frames. Most of them have off-white mats around them. There is a sense of soft, generous space. Nothing is drawing my eye. To create a successful gallery wall, it's important that the style of artwork that you choose has a kind of consistency. How do I choose image sizes, frame thickness, and material in a way that is complementary without becoming redundant? And the best way to do that, I find images with similar colors and similar visual weight, and then I find a mix of frames which go together without stealing attention. And I'll give you the number one simple hint. Lay out your gallery wall on the floor. Images and frames. Stand on a chair and squint your eyes. And if anything is stealing your focus, it's too much. That's the piece that has to change. It's okay to have an image which is a little bit bigger or a little bit stronger that gives you a focus, but where I get into trouble with a gallery wall is when my eye is going too many places. The ideal goal is that you can step back and it all goes to texture. I want the images on the wall to envelop me and almost become like a larger scale wallpaper. You can apply the exact same gallery wall principle to a bookshelf. Now, there are design bookshelves. For me, that always feels a little too too intentional. The positive and negative space in a bookshelf should happen organically. Here's what I do. I sort my books by category. Then I start laying them out by size, big to small vertically, and the ones that don't fit vertically, I have to place horizontally. On top of those little horizontal stacks, I then put my stuff, a little piece of sculpture. I've got a beautiful vase. Each of those individual pieces takes on a life of its own. And then do the same thing you did with the gallery wall. Step back 10 or 12 feet, squint your eyes, and pull out the pieces that grab too much attention. Obviously, if I'm furnishing a room, the next important thing, maybe the most important thing to talk about is furnishings. There's always going to be, for me, an anchor. And the anchor can be a sofa in the living room. It can be a bed in the bedroom. It can be a rug. It can be a piece of art. But I want to start with the anchor. In the holiday cottage, the living room is anchored by that blue velvet tufted ottoman. That shape and the dark color brings your eye to the middle of the room. With furniture layout, you've got two elements. One is the shape of the pieces themselves, and one is the layout of the furniture. My suggestion would be opt for asymmetrical, non-matching layouts of the furniture. Are we in a little 5-foot love seat, or can we fit a 10-footer in there? Do we want a sectional, or do we want two matching sofas? A daybed is wonderful because it's like a mashup of a couch and a bed. It's already moved me in the direction of soft, comfortable, cozy. And I'm going to lean into softer, rounded arms, rounded back, slip-covered furniture. The couch in Meg Ryan's apartment in You've Got Mail is a home run. And when I add some pillows and throws in complementary textured fabric, I've got a space that feels safe, comfortable, and contained, and super, super inviting. Something that is popular in this moment, which years from now may not be, people are doing these multiple coffee table things. You can find a lot of nesting kidney shapes, a little higher, a little lower, a little larger, a little smaller. That is a great solution. And as you start to feel the pieces of the puzzle moving toward fitting together, that will help you with cozy. It's very important, in my opinion, to bring warmth through history. I'm always going to love a little bit of natural wood. In this moment right now, we're very much about bleached oak, which I like. It's a little bit modern, it's a little bit Scandinavian, but there is definitely a place for warm, deep walnut antiques. Lighting. In the daytime, most of the light in my space is going to come from outside filtering in. At night, the space is really defined out of blackness. I can either flood the space with light, in which case it's going to look like a supermarket, and you know what I mean by that. Very even, very white, too bright. Super useful, choosing olive oil, not cozy. The broad general rule is incandescent, practical fixtures. Table lamps, floor lamps, wall sconces, chandeliers, ideally with nice parchment shades. That's going to give you warm, sourcey lighting. Try to avoid can lights and try to avoid track lighting. Bare minimum. If you've got can lights, they must be on a dimmer. Wall sconces on one dimmer, and the can lights are on another dimmer, a table lamp by the bed and a table lamp on the dresser. Now you notice I talked about incandescent lights. They are harder and harder to find. Luckily, you can now get these filament bulbs, which tend to be warmer color temperature. Here's the simple thing. Higher color temperature, around 4,000 degrees Kelvin, is going to be very blue. That's like outdoor lighting. If you can stay below 3,000 degrees Kelvin, more like 2,600, you'll be in a more amber, incandescent light, warm glow kind of lighting. Don't cheap out on the dimmers. Put your lights, especially built-in lighting, on dimmers. The other thing that's good is the under cabinet lighting, the above cabinet lighting, strips of lighting inside your bookshelves. What I want is to feel like a nucleus of warmth around each of those practical light fixtures. And in the space that falls off is where I have depth. In the cozy house that you're creating, the icing on the cake is a little bit of flowers and plants. Now, I have to admit, personally, I can kill your plants by looking at the screen right now. I do not have a green thumb. I love cut flowers. I'm a little bit cheap, so I don't always have them. Not arranged, just a bunch of identical flowers that fill a vase. And like the shape of the vase is important. Not because you see the vase, but because of how the stems sit in the vase. It's the cherry on top. In terms of plants, what's really popular today is these wild branches. And you can get them cut or you can get them live. I'm not going to say that these make your space cozier, but they bring a little element of freshness and life and color. Because we often live with cozy interiors in a more muted palette, if I have just like a hit of color from fresh flowers or one of those green kind of mangy overgrown plants, it just brings a little freshness and life to the space. Because what I'm really interested in as a production designer is how do I create spaces that convey a feeling? When Cameron Diaz in The Holiday goes all the way to London and gets to this tiny little Rose Hill cottage, she walks inside and it feels like a hug. For me, that's cozy.